granniopteryx, she knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello. Anyone who actually fancies being triggered by a Jason Arday mention, by all means, feel free. I'm going to be starting off by talking about a link, which I'm very sorry I can't find it now, but it was a link to a video of a Jason Arday lecture in which he was talking about the numbers of professors in British higher education and how many of them were black and how many were women. I couldn't stand to watch it. I actually couldn't stand to watch it. I felt like I was being forced to touch something unclean. Now, this of course has nothing to do with Arday. It's what he was saying. The so-called and it was also to do with the so-called academics who made up his audience, who were expected to sit there in the theatre and be lectured about, higher education sins in not employing enough black people. I'm going to be concentrating on the female aspect of this because it seems like sociology is full of females, and it's sociology I'm having a particular problem with right now. But I want you to remember that men are involved in this as well. I'm just approaching this from a mostly female angle. Let's start with the race thing that Arday was talking about. Britain has never had trouble with black academics. When there were hardly any black people at all in Britain, for instance, in 1948, there was W. Arthur Lewis, who was later Sir William Arthur Lewis, and he got a chair in Manchester University in 1948. And as I said, at that time, there were hardly any black people in the country. And he got that chair by being competent. I think he got a Nobel Prize, actually. I want to point out to the rest of the world who might be watching this video that, yes, of course, there has always been prejudice and bigotry in Britain. It has always been prejudice and bigotry in every society. But as a nation, Brits historically have had very little trouble with foreign people or foreign cultures or people who look different. If you want a really striking example of that, try Googling a famous legal case, Somerset versus Stuart, 1772, when a man brought to this country as a slave sued his master and won through the British courts. It shouldn't be a surprise. The Brits are a seagoing people, and in any country, ports are more cosmopolitan and tolerant. The whole of Britain is a port. There's one town, it's called Cotton in the Elms, which happens to be 70 miles from the sea. That's the furthest point from the sea of anywhere in the British Isles. And not many people realise that. Anyway, back to that Arday lecture. As I said, I felt a physical revulsion to his ideas and to the audience sitting there, all polite and quiet. Well, they were being idiots. They were being stupid and masochistic. They were being stupid beyond imagination. And I felt a physical revulsion to that as well. And you know what? I'm sure that audience also felt odd about what they were hearing, but they were suppressing their natural feelings. It's almost as if they were enjoying this feeling of squashing down what every fibre of their being was shouting at them, that this is wrong. It's sort of like getting a yen for green fruit. You know it's going to give you the runs, but for some reason you can't stop yourself. And I was just watching this and thinking, why is this happening? So, of course, I have a theory, which you are welcome to disagree with. I don't disable comments. I cut out comments if they start making direct, usually sexual insults to me. I don't see why why I should stand that from anyone. But apart from that, you can have the maddest ideas you want, and I won't delete them. Anyway, I welcome comments, the more the merrier. Oh yes, and I'm sorry, I'm going to digress here because I have had some buy me a coffees and other gifts. And up to now, I have always messaged an individual thank you to anyone who gives me any contribution. But now, since that video where I was criticising a horrendous paper masquerading as an academic investigation, I've been spending my time answering comments. And please forgive me. I value every gift. But there just aren't enough hours in the day to talk to everyone anymore. And I do hope you understand that I do appreciate your generosity. However, let's get back to the main thing. Talking about not enough hours in the day segues very nicely into the idea of not having enough time, and back to my theory. Because you see, this is my theory. It used to be that most of the population spent most of their time baling hay, picking fruit, baking, ploughing, herding and doing other jobs like that. It used to be that a lot of the people now employed in universities and offices once upon a time would have been breaking their backs as agricultural or manual workers of some sort, milking cows, scrubbing floors, slapping linen on washboards, stoking furnaces. Do you remember that wonderful television series adaptation of Pride and Prejudice? It was a marvellous TV show with Colin Firth and Jennifer Ely. Now, just think of it. How many servants did you see in that show? The only domestic servants I remember were the housekeeper at Pemberley, who showed Elizabeth and her aunt and uncle around the Darcy mansion. And there was Darcy's groom, with whom he was riding home, before that famous swimming, wet t-shirt scene. Now, we saw a lot more of the Bennet family home in that series. And if you think about it, the family lived in a fairly big house in the countryside, meaning that it would have been, at least in part, a farm. There certainly would have been gardens that needed taking care of. There would have been workers in those gardens. There would have been various sorts of male servants. Mr. Bennet would certainly have had a valet. There would have been dozens of girls, and I do mean girls, like 13-year-olds, sweeping, peeling potatoes, laying fires. Nothing in the show actually showed those people's existence, did they? I don't know whether it was a budgetary thing or because the production company was embarrassed about the numbers of NPCs that would have been around. But of course, a show like that, as delightful as it was, gives us the wrong idea. At that time, and even until the mid-20th century, the world was filled with manual workers and servants. I'll tell you something about my mother. She spent her early childhood in a part of Leeds that was actually condemned as unfit for human habitation while she was living there. I mean, her parents were that poor. The house was a 2-up, 1-down terrace. That is, there were 2 bedrooms upstairs and a living room, kitchen, everything room downstairs, with a pump at the kitchen sink for the only water supply, and the toilets for the whole street were at the end of the road. My mother told me that when they came back home in the evening after they'd been to see a film at the local cinema, she and her mother would wait outside the door while her dad went in first to stamp on all the cockroaches. They weren't starving. My grandfather earned a reasonable, steady living, but this was hardly gracious living, was it? And yet every Monday a washerwoman came round to help my grandmother with the laundry. As poor as they were, they had a washerwoman coming in. There were so many servants because everything had to be done by hand. That's not the case now. I shove clothes into the washing machine, I put my instant pot on timer, all the people who would have been stirring and scrubbing in my house in years gone by, they're not there anymore. I have machines. And what do we do with all these spare people now? Well, yeah, they end up in joke jobs, don't they? And some of them, deep down, know their lives are pretty useless and basically unproductive. Kitchen maids may have got housemaid's knee and bad backs from scrubbing floors, but having scrubbed those floors, most would at least have seen that they'd achieved something. I am, by the way, not calling for a return to those days. They were horrible for almost everyone. But I'm simply pointing out a reality. And it's a reality somewhere at the backs of our minds we all have a conception of. And all those people in those joke jobs, deep down, they have a slightly guilty feeling, but lack the self-awareness to define why. So when someone gives them something to be guilty about, it's a bit of a relief. Now, again, this is a touchy subject, but I also happen to think it's probably worse if these women are childless. What I am saying is that if enough childless women are in the same place, all with the same feeling that they aren't actually creating anything, then you're going to get a Jason Arday, because he was their creation. I don't know how many of you have read any of Isaac Asimov's stuff, but if you have, you might remember from one of his robot short stories, a character, well, from several of them actually, a character called Susan Calvin, who is described professionally as a robo-psychologist. And one of these stories featured a robot which became victim to an accident. The accident completely wiped its entire positronic brain, to the extent that it didn't even have the basic programming. It was a completely blank slate. And Susan Calvin took charge of reprogramming it. And she called it Lenny, and she took it through all the stages of a sort of childhood. And before she realised it, she ended up with maternal feelings for this machine. And of course, you take all kinds of shit from your kids, don't you? Perhaps you might guess who the Lenny is in our recent modern story. I'll leave you to think about that one. Till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.